Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You're tuned to the MC Lars podcast. Today is Monday, July 8th. It is episode 45 with Wordburglar. This weekend I played Anime Midwest with Mega Ran and Whitey Cracker. It was tight. And my next show is the New Jersey Gamer Con, July 27th in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Then I've got a bunch of fall dates. Today's episode is brought to you by the following Patreon supporters. Some of my new ones, Jeff, Nathan, and random geek named Brent. And some of my old ones, Jaron, Jeremy, and Nick. Thank you very much for your love and support. If you sign up, you get my entire back catalog, discography, and you get 2 songs a month. I've got 2 songs this month. One is about Mad Magazine and the legacy of it and how I'm going to miss it. And the second one is about Johnny Appleseed. So don't miss that. It's super exciting. What else? Well, let's get right into it. Wordburglar. I heard Wordburglar years ago, and back in the early days of nerdcore, you know, there was 2 types of songs you'd hear. You'd hear stuff that was either well produced and funny and like energetic, and you could hear the vocals clearly, and then stuff that was very amateur and like not bad, but had work to go. And when I heard Wordburglar, I was like, oh, this guy is almost not even nerdcore because it's like punchlines over cool breakbeats, super well produced, super fun, old school flavor. And I instantly started enjoying Wordburglar. So we met a few times over the years. We became friends, and he was in town for a show we both did in Philadelphia. So he came by my spot, and we talked about what it's like being an independent Canadian artist growing up, his business plan, some of the time he beat Drake for an audition in a commercial. It was pretty awesome. So this is my interview with Wordburglar. We're going to end with the remix of Reading Rainbow with former Fat Boys. Check it out. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a very special guest all the way from Canada. We've got Wordburglar. What's up, man?
Oh, what's up? MC Lars. This is great. I just got a great workout coming up the stairs. You know, I'm used to coming up all these stairs from my paper routing days when I would deliver in all these old apartment buildings. And I would love going up the stairs and you could kind of smell what each floor was cooking. Oh, you're making a broccoli casserole. They got some muffins on, the 7th floor. That sounds good.
That floor, they have a bunch of birds. So climbing up to the 5th floor was like old hat to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I notice a lot of similarities to growing up in Halifax, and like a lot of the architecture is probably built around the same time, right? Like, way over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you used to deliver papers?
I was a paper boy, yeah, for 7 years. Yeah, all up through junior high and high school, and even up to when I was legal drinking age. And I remember, having to leave a bar because I had to get up early the next morning. I got to deliver papers tomorrow. Be like, what are you're a paper boy?
So that's how you could afford a lot of your old records and comic books and all that?
Yeah, I spent all that money I would earn on the route. I'd spend on comic books and CDs and records, baseball hats, video games. I remember saving up to get like Street Fighter 2 or Chrono Trigger and all these awesome Super Nintendo games that would go on to become games of esteem and legend.
Wait, so in 7th grade though, you probably weren't driving, right?
No, I wasn't driving. No,
you were on a bike.
No, I was walking. It was all walking. That's what I'm saying.
I see.
Yeah, it was all walking downtown, up and down buildings. Like apartment buildings are great for anyone who's had a paper route because you can it's kind of an extinct job now, but because apartment buildings you can just nail so many different deliveries in one go, right? It's like, well, I got 30 papers, but they're all at this building, so I can just take the elevator to like the 10th floor and then run down the stairs and just slide papers under everybody's doors. It was great.
What was the paper?
The Mail Star.
Wow.
Yeah, the Chronicle Herald and Mail Star. And I do a comic book now called The Last Paper Route with my buddies Alex and Dave Howlett, who does the comic art. And it's inspired by all that time. So, I used to deliver newspapers to make money to buy comics and music. Now I make music and comics about delivering papers. So, yeah, it's the circle. It continues.
It's a very 20th century kind of nostalgic career, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who does that job now, or it's digital?
The kids, yeah, it's, you know what, it's gone mostly to a lot of older people, a lot of retirees that do cars, and then a lot of digital, right? Like print media. As much as I love paper, and I know you love all your books and everything, like it's, I mean, print newspapers are on the decline. People are anticipating in the next 5 to 10 years there won't be. But it was, we remember, I mean, you remember the time before the internet. People needed their paper. Like I was like, 12 or 13. And like if I delivered a paper 5 minutes late, people were upset.
Wow.
Like they needed that news. They wanted to know whatever was happening in the city. You couldn't just check your pants computer and be like, hey, okay, what's the weather going to be? Who won the baseball game?
Right. And so it was you were like bringing the light to them. Yeah. What time do you have to wake up?
Saturday mornings, I was up at about 6 a.m., but during the week, it was after school. So,
okay.
Yeah, so my best pal, Arlex, the robot.
Did you ever have any dogs that were scary?
On the paper route?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one or two. I mean, the scariest people were the customers, and they'd try and screw you over, and you'd get like, I had to collect money. So you're this kid knocking on the doors every 2 weeks saying, I have my like $5.45 for the paper the last 2 weeks. I didn't order paper. I don't know, but I've been delivering it all week. And then like people would try and screw you over. The craziest thing that ever happened, I rap about it in one of my older songs, The Root. And this is totally true story. Like one summer, this apartment building had about 8 apartments in it, was just getting stinkier and stinkier. And like every day there's like this smell going on in the building. I didn't know what it was. And it got to the point where I was like plugging my nose and holding my breath and running through the building, trying not to inhale because it was so bad. And then just at its peak, and there was a heat wave in the summer. And this sounds like something out of like The Burbs, which is an amazing movie.
Yeah.
And I show up on this one day just as it had gotten so bad, and they're wheeling out a dead body.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and I saw the toe tag on the foot, and someone had just died in their apartment, and no one discovered it for weeks, and they were just in their apartment. Not to get all
but
grisly.
They smelt it. The neighbors probably smelt it.
Yeah, I think if you live there, they must have just been like, what is going on?
That's
like,
crazy.
A raccoon die in like the air conditioning vent or something?
Right.
Yeah, so it was a little more grisly than
so
that.
They didn't have to pay their paper costs.
No. Yeah, they got off the hook. That's one way to get out of your bill.
So that's crazy that they would have a kid be collecting the money.
It's insane. When looking back, like I learned a lot of discipline from that job, which I carry with me today. And just like, I had like my boss, who's our district manager, took it so seriously. And, we were always trying to like get starts, and a start meant you were starting a new customer on the paper route. And, but no, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about just dealing with people and just being comfortable with all kinds of different people, all ages, from all walks of life, just being a kid delivering their newspapers. And just because a lot of people just wanted to talk. So I would wind up having crazy conversations with these people and just learning so much, and like, wow, so I got a lot of fodder. And again, that's what the comic book is about. So The Last Paper Route, which is just a self-published book that I do, and it's just all these tales of the paper route in the 90s.
True stories.
True story. Inspired. I mean, we take creative liberty to make it like a more entertaining comic book, but everything is rooted in a seed of reality.
Well, that's where good art comes from.
Yeah.
I saw a documentary yesterday, and I wonder if you've heard of it. It's called The Great Hip Hop Hoax.
No.
Okay. So is this woman, Jeannie Finlay, it's the story of these 2 kids from Scotland who in 2004 fronted like they were American kids, and they did like a fake accent, and they got signed to Sony as a hip hop group, as like a hip hop duo. Like they're supposed to be like the next Beastie Boys or something. And eventually it kind of came out that they were putting on this act, but it's interesting because it's this perspective of them in Scotland feeling like removed from hip hop, trying to emulate this American culture. But watching it, you can like tell like how they dress, how they talk. Like you could tell that they're not truly American, and that kind of like, it's kind of derailed their career. But it's an interesting documentary because it's about how you rep your authenticity. You have to feel like American is how you have to rap and your style. As someone part of the Commonwealth, I was wondering, like, I thought it'd be an interesting talking point because it's like, how did you see American culture, and like, how has your perspective on it changed as a rapper?
Well, I mean, obviously rap started in America, and I loved it. Nova Scotia, it's funny, Nova Scotia, it's sort of a fluke of history that it was not part of the States, because apparently 100 years ago, plus everyone wanted, like, they were trying to get Nova Scotia to join the States. Now, I'm not like a huge historiological scholar, but growing up in a very, a province that's filled with a lot of history, it's always fascinated me. And so there's always been a strong American connection. We'd get a lot of American TV channels. Boston is very close with us. There's this big event called the Halifax Explosion, where half the city got destroyed in the harbor by these ships collided and they blew up with this gunpowder. It's insane. Wow. And Boston was the first city to come to Halifax's rescue. So there's been a long history of American and Nova Scotian connection. Anyways, growing up, I never really thought there was much difference really until I got older. Like, I played with G.I. Joes a lot, and they were like a real American hero. So I was like, well, we're North America. Right. So, I love baseball. I've been obsessed with baseball my whole life, rap, and G.I. Joe, which are all very American things. Yeah. Love apple pie too, not to get so cliched.
Comic books too, I guess.
Comic books, American comic books, 100%. Yeah. So basically, we were, I guess, finding the identity, at least when it came to me creating my own music. To me, the best rap was always authentic. So you rap about what you know, whether you're on the West Coast, East Coast, whatever. Down South, it's like the best rap comes through when people are being true to who they are and what they know, obviously, right? Sure. And their stories and everything. So I always knew, I always felt, not authentic when, if I ever thought of writing a rhyme, I was like, that's not really me. Like, what am I about? Well, I'm a paper boy. I'm from Canada. I like comic books. I like to eat sandwiches. So I was always writing raps about the stuff that I loved and that was true to me and true to my experience. And, meanwhile, inundating myself with any rap I could get my ears on. So I guess in terms of I've always just felt completely comfortable just rapping about who I am. And I'm, born and raised in Canada. And there's definitely differences, but there's so many differences. I see it as differences from province to province and state to state, right? If you go, Tennessee or you go, California, New York, whatever, there's going to be differences everywhere, obviously. So, I guess I don't know. I mean, I feel we're so similar in a lot of ways. Yeah. And it's not really, as opposed to going to Japan or going to the UK, but I do feel a connection when we go to the UK because there is that Commonwealth in a weird thing, right? It's like, hey, we got the same lady on our money.
In the same language. But it's such a, Glasgow to LA is very different from Toronto to New York in terms of the cultural differences. And it, to me, the documentary was a little bit sad because the group was called Syllable and Brains, and that they
heard of them.
They were trying to, to feel like they had to get signed in 2004, they had to emulate this culture. And I recommend the documentary because like what you said, their shortcoming was that slowly people were like, oh, this is not real. If they'd just been authentic, and tried to rep that Northern Scotland, it would have been more interesting. But maybe doubtful that Sony would have signed them.
Yeah. Well, again, it is respecting, especially with hip hop. A huge part of it is respecting the culture and respecting rap and where it came from and studying it. It's like if you're a classical, a pianist, you study classical piano and everything before you can get up to do your contemporary stuff or whatever. So rap, I don't remember a time when I didn't listen to rap. Right. And I just, it's respecting the culture and then adding your own, what are you going to add to it? How are you going to keep building this while staying true to the roots? And, obviously that gets sort of bastardized and you see when different cultures, and especially with hip hop, everyone is so possessive of what their idea of this is hip hop, this is hip hop. And it's well, if that's hip hop to you, that's great. But then sometimes it's a lot of the negative elements that get, blown up, and it's just that's what people see, and they're like, oh, I think I need to act like I'm a criminal all the time, or I think I have to act like a certain way or talk about certain subject matter, even though whatever, they're from Glasgow. So if that was maybe their downfall, as opposed to just rapping about hummus or whatever. Right. Again, not to stereotype, I know many Scottish people who hate hummus. So.
No, you mean haggis.
Haggis. Right. Oh my God.
Haggis and hummus.
I just started my coffee. Sorry, everyone.
I feel you. I'm
waking up.
I think, and that now in 2019, it's what makes you weird and different is what makes you stand out. Because everyone can do the auto-tune, Xanax raps, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
no
that's a good way of putting
no
it.
disrespect to that stuff, but like the opiate rap, right? Like it's rebellious and it's what it is, but it feels like an Instagram filter on everything. And I this often comes up, this topic. Like was talking to Jesse Dangerously about this. It's like,
Yeah.
we don't want to be the old guys in our 30s who are like, oh, rap sucks now, because it doesn't.
No.
But the good rappers, I think, are the ones who try to find the originality, even maybe under that aesthetic, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's great rap being made every day. I mean, amongst like all of us and our friends and peers, and then even like the younger generation, there's great stuff. I mean, I've been touring, I've been on tour since August. I know you're on tour all the time, and playing with younger acts and meeting rappers who are like in their like late teens or early 20s, and they are like completely against that whole, like, we refer to it as like the Drake phenomenon,
Right?
Because that's a huge thing. Obviously, Drake from Toronto, so that's like so much of that Drake sound. But Toronto is basically the hotbed for rap in Canada's history. When you look, if you ever heard of Maestro Fresh Wes, I don't know. He was like the first huge rap superstar to come out of Canada, and he was from Toronto. He was this area, Scarborough, and Scarborough became this hotbed for just amazing hip hop throughout the years. So since then, there's been like Chocolare and Cardinal Official and
Swollen Members, are they Toronto?
they're West Coast, actually.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so they're Vancouver.
Yeah.
But they're dope too, and like Rascals. So Vancouver had its own scene.
Yeah.
Toronto, I mean, to me, the Toronto rappers were always like, there's a lot of New York influence, but they made it their own. And then again, I grew up in Halifax, and I was kind of back and forth between Halifax and Toronto. 'Cause
Yeah.
all my family was from Toronto, and I moved there shortly after I finished school. And I was always like, the Toronto rap scene always amazed me. But then with this Drake thing coming in, and again, not hating on Drake, he's done very well for himself.
Yeah.
But it certainly influenced a whole new era of rap, which was not so much lyric based. And to me, the lyrics are such a huge, that's 50% of your hip hop. It's
Yeah.
like you need the lyricism, and you need to be writing, and you need to be pushing yourself to express your ideas better. And when it is that mumbly Drake thing, I mean, I could go on and on about it, but I think there's good young kids making dope rap today for sure. And the Drake stuff is more sort of in the pop category. That sort of,
Because it's familiar and it's melodic and it's emotional. And
yeah,
I hadn't thought of that. The SoundCloud stuff was kind of like a footnote to his kind of sound, the singing rapping. You're right. That's a good point. And that was what, like 2008, 2009, he started getting big, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I can tell you, I know when he started getting big, because I met Drake before he was huge. He used to be on this TV show, really popular in Canada, called Degrassi High. It's a high school teen drama. There's been
He was like in a wheelchair or something?
Yeah, well, he didn't start the series in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
but there was a big episode where he got shot and had to be in a wheelchair.
Oh,
But
wow.
anyways, he was on the show. It was huge, and it was like Degrassi, the next generation. So it's like Star Trek, except Canadian high school. So there's been multiple eras of it.
That's funny.
Anyways, this show was huge. And so
Yeah.
he basically had this enormous fan base from this TV show, and he was parlaying that into his music career. And I got called to go on an audition in Toronto for Pizza Pops, which I don't know if you have Pizza Pops here. They're basically like these little, like kind of like a calzone, a microwave like
sure.
pizza panzerotti thing. You heat up. And
Yeah.
You eat a ton of them when you're like 14 and whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got called in audition for this TV commercial where they were looking for like rappers to rap about Pizza Pops.
Yeah.
So I get called in, and there was a bunch of Toronto rappers there. Danio, who's like this other, he's this Toronto rapper who's been around a long time. And who's there in the audition waiting room? It's Aubrey, Drake. And this is the pre-Drake thing. Anyways, I get called in. Danio gets called in. I assume Drake got called in. A bunch of these people get called in. And then I wound up getting the part with Danio.
Oh, wow.
So Danio and I were in this national TV commercial rapping about Pizza Pops. This was about 2006, 2007.
Is it on YouTube?
Yeah, there is a version on YouTube.
That's great.
And one of the actors has gone on to be in a bunch of HBO stuff. Anyways, it's super funny to me because it's like,
Yeah.
at the time I was like, that ad paid like crazy dough. Like it helped me to go on tour and finish Burglaritis and do all this stuff. And it's funny looking back now that like that I beat Drake for a Pizza Pops
Yeah.
commercial.
That's pretty
But I'd take his career now.
Wonder why they didn't hire him.
Didn't have the lyrical skills, man. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I was like, they had me rap. I was rapping my ass off in that room and freestyling and just like keeping it going. And Daniel's a super skilled lyricist, and Drake can obviously rap. But maybe he wanted too much. Who knows? Who knows what it could have been? Right.
I always thought that started from the bottom. I was always like, wait, but didn't you have a TV show and a fan base you mobilized? But I guess started from the bottom in that he pivoted and started from a new scene. I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely a song that comes under much scrutiny.
Yeah.
No, I mean, he used to work at Shoppers Drug Mart. I think that's the idea, which is like basically like a CVS or a Walgreens.
Before he was on TV.
Yeah, and then he sort of worked his way up. And obviously he's got tons of talent. And if he ever hears this podcast, Drake, I got love for him. And hook up Bergie, man. So why you forgot about Berg, dude? Come on.
He's probably the biggest, obviously one of the rappers in the world, and definitely the biggest Canadian rapper, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, again, and he's given love back to but Maestro Fresh West I'd equate Maestro to like a Rakim, like his style, his rap style. It's like that late '80s, like super lyrical, like upbeat, like the drum breaks are just like little sort of the rhythms are faster and just like look up Maestro Fresh West. Dope. And all your listeners, if you're not familiar, he's a crazy rapper, a huge influence on me as a kid for sure. Yeah.
Were you into the organized rhyme?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, that first album was hilarious.
Yeah. Was that big when that came out?
Yeah. It was at least like on the school grounds, every kid I knew had it. And because it was like a mix of, I don't know if you've ever heard the full album, but there's like comedy skits on it and like a bunch of different, they were doing a lot of stuff. And then, they kind of went nowhere. And then all of a sudden this Tom Green guy popped up and he did pretty well.
Was he doing the show before that? Or was that before his whole cable access stuff?
I believe that was before the cable access show, because that would have been, OR was probably check the OR. You like it so far? That was probably, I want to say 90 or 91.
Wow, way back.
Yeah, so when did the Tom Green show really, I mean, he blew up on cable, at least with MTV. It blew up mid-90s, late 90s, I guess. And then he had that cable access show in Ottawa. So I guess you had to live in Ottawa to catch that show. So it would have been just a local thing. But yeah, he had a crazy trajectory.
I know. Interesting.
Yeah, he's got a new album out actually with our friend Peter Project, who I work with a lot, Coins, and he produced some tracks for him on his new record.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. If your listeners don't know, there's this great album called Daft Science, where Coins, a.k.a. Peter Project, who's a dope beat producer, he remixed he took all Beastie Boys acapellas and mixed it with Daft Punk music and created all these new songs. And it's called Daft Science. Super, super dope record. Great. You can find it online. It's good stuff.
That's a cool find. Yeah. That's a cool concept.
Yeah.
Sean, when did people, because this is something I wanted to ask you. When did people start associating you with nerdcore? How do you feel about that? And I guess I'm trying to figure out. I first heard you probably 2006, 2005 when your earlier stuff came out.
Yeah.
So what was, how did that happen that you became part of that movement, and how do you feel about it?
Well, I tell you, I feel great.
Yeah.
Easily. I guess I found out about it through, it would have been Jesse Dangerously.
Okay.
And now I remember the MySpace era. I think I had first heard of you maybe on MySpace, maybe around 2005. I didn't even have a computer at the time. I was going to the library and using the computer at school and stuff to get stuff up. But I was putting out rap around 96, 97. I was making these little tapes and I was sampling video games. I'd sent away for this Final Fantasy 3-disc CD collection because I got the video game and it had this order form where it's buy this soundtrack. I was like, oh man, then I could make beats from the CD because I'd have the actual music from the video game because I hadn't figured out how to record right off the actual Super Nintendo then. So, and I had all that paper route money, of course.
Right.
So I remember getting that, and I started making all these like Final Fantasy beats, and then I'd be rapping about video games and comic books and stuff. So yeah, and then I put out this tape with my crew at the time. We were just my buddies, and we all freestyled together. We were called the Dregs of Society. And then I was working at a comic book shop, and in high school, and just people would come in and knew I was a rapper, and it was great because it was like right downtown Halifax. So all the Halifax hip hop legends like Joe Run and Buck 65 and 6'2" and all these people, if anyone knows like Halifax hip hop, these were like the guys. And they would come in to like check out the store and buy comics, and like they kind of knew me, and like so I'd be rapping and like be like, oh yeah, I'm buying tapes off them and stuff because I was too young to get into their shows.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. So I'm making video game songs, rapping about comic books in the comic shop, doing all this stuff. And then one day Jesse's like, hey, you know there's all these other people doing this stuff now, and it's called nerdcore, and you should check it out. So he gave me some MC Frontalot music.
Right.
I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I really dug Frontalot because I've always felt his style is so really unique and original, but like totally grounded in like rap wordplay and everything. And I love the way all his different inflections and the way he writes and everything. Much love, and I've got a lot of love for you and like the whole scene. So we'll get there. We'll get to the love. Sean. We'll get to all the love. Anyway, so this, I guess, it was maybe around 2006, whenever that Nerdcore Rising stuff. It was before that album had come out.
Right.
But Jesse had been working on this stuff. And Jesse was always way more in touch with sort of like that online world than I was. And because, again, I'm like the dinosaur with print. Even to this day, I'm like rather read a magazine than a blog. And,
right.
So I heard about Frontalot, and then I guess I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't realize there was like that much of a scene going on. And then I got invited to go to Nerdapalooza, which was in 2008. And that was in Orlando, and Hex and Rob and all these people, and they brought me out. And that's when I met Megaran and Schaefer and like Zealous One, Dual Core, YD Cracker, MC Frontalot, so many amazing people, Z, like just all these great people. And, sadly you weren't there, but everyone was sort of like talking about you, and it was like this community just sort of blew me away.
Right. That
everyone was sort of doing, and there were definitely like these pockets, and there's like Scurvy Dan doing like pirate stuff, and obviously Rand had like the Mega Man stuff going on, and everyone, and there's just like this amazing, positive, dope community. And it was kind of like, oh, this is kind of what I've been doing.
Right.
Obviously I'm like very steeped in sort of like underground hip hop, DIY aesthetic, but I was just rapping about nerdy stuff. And, because I remember Curtis Blow sampling Transformers. Like I had the record of like, I'm chilling, and like all the Wu-Tang and everything. So there was always comic books and all this stuff floating around. And I was joking with someone the other day, I remember when like Ghostface Killer's Iron Man album came out. They're like, why is it called Iron Man? I'm like, because it's Tony Stark, man. It's Tony Stark. Yeah. And like today, everyone knows Iron Man's Tony Stark.
Right, right.
I knew it first.
Before the movies.
I knew what Iron Man was before the movie. Also, so did millions of other people who read the comics.
Well, and that's interesting because nerdcore became more than just music as a community and the fans. And it was like, I remember when I first toured with Frontalot, realizing, oh, these fans, they're small, but they buy merch and they're loyal. And it's like Violent J from ICP said, one Juggalo is worth more than 1,000 mainstream fans. And I think that's similar because they're ride or die and they're so loyal. And shout out to, I know a lot of you are listening to us right now, and we appreciate you,
Oh, for sure. And I just love being able to like finally find people who know if I'm making a reference to like Wood God from like 1970s Marvel Comics, someone's going to come up to me and be like, yo, you just rapped about Wood God and the West Coast Avengers. Like that stuff always was like, I'd be dropping these lines, in my high school cafeteria, and people were like, what's this guy talking about Serpent Society and whatever, and then like, I don't know what he's saying, but I guess it sounds cool.
Right.
And then now it's like finding our people. So I've always loved all this stuff, and just, it's an incredible community. So shout out everybody listening. Absolutely. Absolutely. And shout out you and Front and Megaran and Schaefer and Dual Core and just Whitey Cracker and Michael Kill, everybody just like doing all this amazing stuff and keeping this community together and being, sort of being like Nerdcore North, I guess, or, nerd of the North. I do feel a little bit away from all this stuff that's going on because in Canada, we have a great little scene in Canada. And obviously, like, I do a lot of like the rap shows and I play all over the place, but the nerdcore scene is not really as big. I mean, I'm sure it is, but it's not quite as mobilized in Canada as it is in the US. So it's amazing to see how everybody comes together. And I meet people. I mean, your fans come to my shows and they're like, well, I heard about you through MC Lars and this and that. I'm like, well, I'm so appreciative of that. And
That's cool.
It's dope. And it's great that as listeners, you can find all these great different albums, whether you want to listen to video games or comics or just stuff about food or fun or literature, like that great new album you just did with Mega Ran. So
thanks, man.
Yeah, dude, like it's just dope. And the cream rises to the top. I know Nerdcore got a lot of flack a while ago, like years ago. And, I've always sort of been like, well, yeah, I mean, I was kind of doing my thing and I'm glad that Nerdcore accepted me as like, this was like great. Like this is part of that. I mean, I always say like I'm a rapper first, but I'm also a nerd. So it's like, and I take my rap very seriously, as do I take my nerdiness. So,
anyone who's been a fan of nerd culture and music, who's been doing it for a while, there's this tendency to be like, oh, well, before superheroes were cool, we were writing for them, and now they're so mainstream. And I wonder if there's this fear sometimes that writing songs about niche superheroes and stuff feels kind of trendy or co-opted, even though we were doing all that stuff before that happened. I wonder if you ever worry about that.
Yeah, I definitely think about that, but I also then sort of reaffirm myself that, hey, this is what I've always been doing.
Right.
I made a song about Fred Braca, who was like the Crimson Guard, who was, that was the alias of the Crimson Guards in Cobra. They were all clones and they all had the same face. It was Fred Braca or Fred Broca, depending how you pronounce it. I mean, I just think of all this stuff. I'm like, and to me, that was like a dope song. Like I just did a song about the Hoojibs, who are these obscure Star Wars characters who have basically been completely written out of canon. But I had this like book and record as a kid, and it was like Star Wars Planet of the Hoojibs. And there's Chewbacca on the cover, and there's like these flying telepathic weird bunny guys. And then this record apparently sold like millions of copies, and all these kids had the Hoojibs, and then never saw him in a movie. I remember when the prequels came out, I was like, oh, maybe we'll get some Hoojibs. Now we got Jar Jar instead. I'm like, what is this? Where are the Hoojibs? Y'all forgot about the Hoojibs. So, and I would always joke with my pal Dave. I'd be like, man, one day I'm going to let the people know the Hoojibs. So yeah, I was just like, the right time came up and I figured a way. You know how you get that, like, once something unlocks, and you're like, oh, I know how to approach this in a song.
Right.
So I did a song called Remember the Hoojibs.
That's
so
great.
Now maybe the 4 people who hear that song will wonder what I'm talking about, and then maybe Google the Hoojibs.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a great take. It's like the Maesters in Game of Thrones, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We become these people who preserve and celebrate 80s, 90s pop culture because it meant a lot to us. And yeah, and the thing I often think about, Sean, is like, okay, where will it all be in 10 years? You know what I mean? And does that matter? Because hip hop is about, I don't know, doing it because you have to and you want to. And yeah, how does this all, these are big questions, but how does this all connect with like the changing face of media, where then if you are doing like niche culture stuff and a very small group of people love it, is that sustainable? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I never made rap thinking I was ever going to make any money. Like, I've just always loved doing it. So I've never been driven by that pursuit. Obviously, the older we get, we're like, yeah, I got to pay my bills. Yeah. But I've always had a side gig. So I'll work a job, and I've been doing rap full time since last August. But, once this current wave kind of dies down, I know I'm going to have to get another side job again. Because rent is crazy. Who can pay, life, and you want to eat well sometimes.
Right.
Read some comics, buy some records.
Right.
So I like to have a side job, so then it doesn't put the full, it doesn't put so much pressure on my music for me to make something that is like, oh, I'll make this because I think it's going to sell a lot. Obviously, I want stuff to sell, and each album I've put out, knock on wood, has been doing better than the last, and it's because of the support of great listeners. And I would love to do this full time for the rest of my life. And I can see myself getting better the more I'm able to just, okay, I'm focusing on this 100%. So we know that. In terms of sustainability, in terms of like the niche concepts, I mean, when I started rapping, I was going to the video store and renting DVDs and videos and video games. Now I'm writing songs about, remember when you used to rent videos? You know? Right. So maybe like 10 years from now, I'll be like, yo, remember when Switch was like dope and like everyone was obsessed with Smash Brothers?
Right. Right.
Remember everyone had a Kickstarter and did all this? Yeah, that was crazy 10 years ago. We didn't even know there'd be like nose crystals that could like give everyone free music through their brains. Or,
right.
Who knows?
Right.
So I guess I don't worry too much about the future because, you know, like with my new album, Rhyme Your Business, not to sound like I'm like promoting with my this and that, but Rhyme Your Business, that's the whole idea. It's just rap what you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I've always done, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. So I'm not worried about falling into like, oh, I'm just making niche stuff, because I'm just going to, you know, I'm hopefully always going to like and enjoy stuff and have perspectives on things that I can write about and create. And yeah, maybe 10 years ago, I might not be rapping as much about comic books or video games. You know, I'm rapping, who knows what influences of the world are going to hit me and that I feel compelled to write about. So,
yeah.
And that's, you know, I don't just write about comics and video games now, but, you know, that's, you know, it's always just experiences. So I think as long as we keep having experiences to inspire us, we'll be able to keep creating music, and then people can go back and be like, oh yeah, Lars, that was during his literary era.
Right.
Yes. Now he's more into, you know, botany.
Right. I like that, Sean. That's a good perspective, that you do it because it's something you have to do and you want to do. And when you put the financial onus on like, oh, I hope I hit the right trending thing, that can be dangerous and that can be disappointing. And then like we're talking about the Syllable and Brains, the Scottish dudes, you know, if something feels like it's not authentic.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah. And so what's the solution is what? Keep putting stuff out, keep like finding and supporting and investing in the community.
Yeah.
And keep pushing yourself lyrically. And that's why I like all of your music feels to me like it comes from a specific, very nostalgic, wonderful era in hip hop, like late 90s, kind of that kind of vibe. And I like that because every time I put on Wordburglar, I know what I'm going to get, and I know it's going to surprise me. And on a technical level, it's going to be funny and clever, but like well produced. And I wanted to ask you, like, what is your writing process, and like, how do you pick the songs that you put on your records?
I'm always writing notes.
Yeah.
I'll write on napkins, write in my phone. I've got like a whole, even today on the subway over here, I was like writing down like things pop into my head. So I'm always writing down little notes here and there. They could be a rhyme, could be a song concept, could just be just whatever, just some random word. And then what I love to do is sit down and go through my notes and just write and just see what I can come up with, piece stuff together. I'll think of something, and you know, so many songs take years to write. Like Rental Patient, which I mentioned, that started during when I was working on the album Replicable Skills, which came out in like 2015.
Right.
But then Rental Patient didn't come out until the new album, Rhyme Your Business, because I didn't quite find that entry point. Like the idea was there, it was like, oh, video stores, remember renting, blah, 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 blah. But then it all came together when it was like, oh, you needed patience. Like that was sort of the connector. That
patience.
Was
good. That's a good pun.
Like, you needed patience. You were the rental patient, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
If you went there and they didn't have Jurassic Park, you had to rent something else, and you had to take a chance on a different movie. And like, I don't know, this one's got a lot of fingerprints on it, so I guess a lot of people rented it.
Right. Yeah.
And so writing, and then I'll write long form. I do a lot of editing. I'll go through stuff over and over again. Sometimes I'll just write an amazing, or at least to me, an amazing rhyme that just doesn't go anywhere. And then once I get a whole bunch of those, I just put them all in one song.
That's
so
good.
Some songs are just all, you know, I do have the songs. I definitely have like my different subcategories of like Wordburglar songs, where it's like one is just all a bunch of crazy rhymes. One will like stick to a theme, you know, one will be like a nostalgic thing, one whatever. Anyways, so.
Yeah, I like one of my favorite songs of yours is kind of different than your others is Cream of Wheat.
Oh, yeah.
That's like it's, can you talk about that song a bit?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that was, you know, I started writing that, you know, shortly after I I moved away from home, and it was sort of my first time moving out of, the city and not being close to like all my close friends and my family that I grew up with. And it was a freezing, dark, gloomy day in Toronto. And I just opened my cupboard and I had cream of wheat. And I loved cream of wheat as a kid. My mom would make me cream of wheat. Like in Canada, especially, it was like when it gets cold and snowy and you get your snow pants on. And, it was like that warmth of cream of wheat. And it just sort of like inspired me. I was like, yeah, cream of wheat. I love cream of wheat. And I made it, and it was like, put a little brown sugar on it. And it was just like, my whole day got better. I felt warm. It was like, my apartment sucked. It was like freezing, wearing snow pants inside.
Right.
And it just kind of warmed me up. And then it brought me back to this place of youth and just retrospective. And that was sort of one of those first big tracks, especially when you're like really young, like early 20s, and like you start to realize, oh, I remember when I was a kid. Because I don't think when you're like 17, I could be wrong, but when you're like 16 or 17, you're not really looking back at like, oh, remember when we were kids? But maybe in your early 20s, that's when, at least for me, I started to think, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe is that never going to happen again? That was amazing. Why does that thing that I used to love 15 years ago never going to happen now because I'm older? So I'm always trying to embrace. I think that's why I think nostalgia is a positive thing. And that song is a lot about nostalgia and reflection. And the weird thing was, I recorded that song the day I broke up with an ex-girlfriend. And we had been together for 5 years, and they were actually the reason, not the reason, but the big reason that I had moved away from Halifax. And then that relationship sort of fell apart. But I'd already sort of written the song, and I think the signs were maybe there in my mind. And then I remember I had the studio session booked, and it had been booked in advance. So I had to go in and record the song. So the recording that was actually came out on the album, that was recorded like that day after basically this huge relationship, the biggest relationship of my life to that point, had just ended. And so even listening to that song, it brings me to that place. I'm like, whoa, I remember exactly that place I was. And that song has resonated with a lot of people. And maybe it's because of that state I was in that day when I recorded it. I mean, since then, I realized that breakup was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. My life has gotten amazing. And my wife now is absolutely phenomenal. And shout out Mili Sashimi. But back then, so that whole song, I think it was kind of like a magical thing. And it was one of the first rap songs I played for my mom, where she was like, I really like this song. So, yeah. So anyways, thanks. You bring up that song. I'm like, yeah, guess I got a lot to say about that one.
I think with me, when I do a song that's personal or like introspective like that, and I have a real emotion to it, those are the gems that, like, the Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Like, when you do comedy and pop culture and nostalgia stuff, humor is a really good way to drop truths. Like, I remember this, or I miss my friend who passed away, or I think this is a messed up thing about capitalism. Like, it's the comics, like Calvin and Hobbes, you can use cartoons and funny references as a way to tell truths. And it's always cool to drop one of those on a record. But I think what makes the nerdcore stuff different than a lot of like the earlier backpacker stuff is some of the, I'm doing air quotes, emo rap was not so fun to listen to. Mm-hmm. And so my favorite songs are like the ones that stand out on records is, oh, that's different. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I wonder, something I think about a lot when I talk to other rappers, especially nerdcore rappers, is when we are doing cut and paste references, where does our story come from when it's like this postmodern collage? Do you think about that, or do you feel like how you reconstruct the pieces automatically tells your story?
Oh, like how the stuff we love affects us? Or
and then how us talking about it is the difference between we're just helping this brand create more brand awareness versus we're creating our own stories. That's
definitely something that I am conscious of. It's like, I'm giving all this free publicity to, X brand.
Right.
I mean, again, I think it ties into the human condition. Definitely, like being, children of the 80s and 90s, like we were exposed to so many different brands. Like it was basically the gloves were off once the 80s hit, and they were able to start marketing and doing these cartoon things. Like we all know Transformers or Power Rangers, whatever, where they were able to say, here's a TV show, here's a toy line, here's ads for the toys featuring stuff from the TV show, here's the movie, here's all this stuff you love, you need it all, like collect them all.
Because it was the boomers had these kids, and the Reagan era capitalism, it was a wealthy era.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, like maybe some of our parents had like Barbies or G.I. Joes or something, in the 60s, 70s, 50s, whatever. But the 80s and 90s are really unique in that way, where like we were inundated with all this stuff, and it was really open season. Obviously now I think toy sales aren't what they used to be with kids. Kids would rather have like an iPad or something. I'm generalizing. I think good toys will always go somewhere. But anyways, I think our story comes out in like, well, we were products of this age and it did affect us in this way, but it is also important to just think about, the human condition. And that's why I do like to write stuff about like my personal things, like whether it is a paper route or cream of wheat. And every album I make, I feel I approach it like a mixtape. I've always loved making mixtapes, like actual cassettes back in the day, and then CD mixtapes, and even like a dope playlist. Like any good mixtape has a great variety. So you've got your quote unquote emo song, you've got your fun party track, you've got like your weird track, the storyteller. So every album I make, it's not really complete to me unless I've sort of ticked off all these different boxes where I'm like, is there enough balance here? Is there enough variety between like, let's get some, let's hit some nerves, let's do some stuff. And, I don't get really too political because I like to, I do keep stuff very, I guess, fun and light and introspective, but I will drop like a couple lines here and there every album. Of like, here's how I feel about this. And like, just, I do take a stance on certain things here and there. Which I think is another great way, like art. I know we're kind of all over the place right now, but this is great. And our art can, your art, as long as it's coming from you, I think you're going to be okay. And like, if you can catch yourself, like I did Welcome to Cobra Island, which is obviously inspired by G.I. Joe, which, there's a lot of issues there that people could get into about like, oh, is this just free brand advertising, or is this just celebrating war or whatever? And like, to me, it's like, no, like this is like incredible storytelling that was created. And I just combined all my experiences reading G.I. Joe comics, watching G.I. Joe cartoons, collecting G.I. Joe toys, like being inundated by this stuff as a kid, but also it gave me this sense of creativity and adventure. And I truly believe all the people who worked on that brand in the 80s were brilliant. And the storytelling and all this stuff, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way about brands they love, Dragon Ball or Pokemon, or Power Rangers, whatever it may be. Like when you find like the really creative people like ourselves who may have been working on the brand 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever, I feel like there's great stuff. And so I wanted to, with Welcome to Cobra Island, that was a celebration of me saying, hey, this stuff is dope as hell. I've always thought it was good. Right. Also, my wife was like, she's like, can you just stop talking to me about G.I. Joe? Just like put it in a song or something. And that was only supposed to be one song. And then it turned into a whole album. Right. Because it just sort of, I realized, I figured out a way that I thought kind of worked. So I'm really proud of that piece. And yes, it's not sponsored by endorsed by any toy brand or company or anything. And it's just sort of my, for all intents and purposes, fan fiction-y album tribute to this cool Cobra-inspired fantasy.
Well, it got a great reaction, didn't it? It's like...
Yeah, it did, yeah. I mean, I put it out for free download, so anyone can, to this day, you can go, if you haven't heard Welcome to Cobra Island, just go to Bandcamp, type in $0, and you can have the whole album for yourself.
Wow.
And yeah, we did a great video, Rap Viper. It's on YouTube with my buddies at 3 a.m., and... I think it looks better than any of the G.I. Joe movies. I mean, don't get me started about G.I. Joe because I could go on. But G.I. Joe is this weird brand, I think, that has just sort of been stuck now. Transformers, Ninja Turtles, everything else kind of evolved. And that G.I. Joe, it was around for 14 years. So for like most of my like toy playing youth, G.I. Joe was around. And there were so many toys out that once I got old enough, I'd go to these garage sales and see all these G.I. Joe figures that I never had as a kid. And I'm like,
Right.
I always wanted these like 20 other guys that I would see on the back of the package, but I only had like 2 of them.
Right.
So then I'd be like buying garbage bags up at yard sales of G.I. Joes. So like my collection got bigger as I got older. Again, much to the chagrin of my wife.
That G.I. Joe, honestly, Sean, is something other than listening to your songs about it, I don't know much about it.
Yeah.
So break it down for me. What's the story? What's like it's not just army guys, right?
It's essentially, think of them as sort of like a super, there's a lot of elements of like Justice League in it. They're like a highly trained special mission task force.
Right.
And so yes, based definitely in military. So G.I. Joe is basically, it's an American team, but it's kind of like international. They have Canadians on the team. There's an Australian guy. There's a bunch of different people.
Okay.
So
is there a Canadian?
yeah, there's a Canadian backstop.
Cool.
Which is a reference to hockey. And,
That's
I'll be
great.
honest, he's never really been my favorite Joe. I'm like, come on, give me a break. But Backstop is the only official Canadian Joe.
Okay.
And they fight against Cobra. And Cobra is a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world. And
Like
that's
ISIS.
Yeah. Well, see, that's where we start to get to
Question,
problematic
right?
now. Kids
Yeah.
don't want to, or parents don't want to be buying terrorist action figures for their kids. Rightly so. I get it, but that's a whole other conversation.
Where's Cobra from?
Well, Cobra Commander is American,
Okay.
but they operate off an island somewhere off the Mexican Gulf. And
is that Cobra Island?
that's Cobra Island, and they operate under diplomatic immunity, so they're able to like build this crazy bunkers, and they've got hospital and laboratories and all this stuff, and they basically create this huge organization of the wildest mercenaries ever. So
Well, who's granted them the diplomatic immunity?
I think there's like some sort of legal technicality. This is all in the comic books. So there's like Larry Hama wrote it. And
Okay.
Larry Hama is such an incredible writer. And he's kind of like the Stan Lee of 80s G.I. Joe. Okay. He's the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby of 80s G.I. Joe, because he helped create all these characters. Now, of course, there's Kirk Bazigian. There's a million other, Ron Rudat, so many other incredible people on the G.I. Joe brand. But Larry gave all these characters storylines and lives, and you would read the comics, and since G.I. Joe started like essentially in the 80s, a lot of these characters had history in Vietnam War. So Snake Eyes was actually a Nam vet, and him and Stalker, they had been in Nam together, and so there were bonds like predating the formation of Joe, and that sort of wound up building. And Larry himself is a veteran, so he was writing all this stuff from a real perspective. And
Was he in Vietnam or?
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was he never dumbed it down. Like clearly he was aiming these comics at, kids to grown-ups, but it always felt like a very real adult storyline you were reading. And so there was like the gravity and the consequences and everything was always there, intertwined with crazy robot troops and ninjas and just all this fantastic stuff. So
And crazy weapons, right?
crazy weapons,
And
crazy
vehicles.
backpacks, crazy vehicles, like helicopters, you name it, space
Right.
stuff. Like G.I. Joe was it was everything you could want. And then the cartoon series took a more sort of, it was a lot more creatively liberal, and they introduced more like mutants and snake people and stuff like that. But it was also really cool. So you'd read the comics and then watch the cartoon, and there was a bit of a disconnect. And anyways, when I did Welcome to Cobra Island, I tried to bridge all the stuff I loved from the comics into the stuff I loved from the cartoon. And Larry, again, I've been talking about G.I. Joe so much, and some of your listeners are like, what is Wordburglar's deal? But it was a really fun pocket of basically escapist fantasy with foundation in military, but there's way much more onto that. And as I have family in the military, and I don't have any family who were snake inspired terrorists that I know about. But there was as a kid, definitely people were like, oh yeah, I saw the military aspects, and you grow up and you're like, okay, well that's it was more to me than that, right? It was G.I. Joe was good, and they were a force for good, and they were a team helping each other out, and everyone had their own specialties, and everyone would build off each other's specialties to do this stuff, like a Justice League thing. So as a child, it's a really, I thought it was a great positive escapist fantasy with a whole bunch of crazy stuff in it. And that's enough G.I. Joe.
and it's grounded in history, which is interesting.
Yeah.
The Vietnam connection's interesting. And the idea of like with Rambo and a lot of those 80s movies, what do we do with the legacy of the problematic tale of the Cold War? And what does that how does that define our culture? And all great popular culture, I think, like Shakespeare noted this, like he would do Julius Caesar and then do it for Elizabethan audiences and try to find connections between the queen and king and how that connected to Roman history, right? Like all great popular culture recycles truths about our experience. And so by rapping about it, you're therefore trying to inject like these layers of meta truths. And I did a few years ago, actually last year I did a Roger Rabbit album for the 30th anniversary.
Yeah.
And I was trying to connect, there's the books that is based on the comics, the movies, the shorts, the sequels that they wrote scripts for that they didn't make. And so for me, it was this question of like, what is canon in this universe? What is not? And having the joy of being able to decide, well, this is canon because I put it on this album. Is it like that with G.I. Joe with what's canon and what's not? Or
sure. Well, and certainly every fan is going to have their stuff that they love and they hate about it.
Right.
And for myself, I mean, I definitely took sort of my interpretations of like, okay, this would make sense. Like, if Wordburglar, who are the snake-based organization, like actual snake people who are discovered in like basically like a Himalayan,
so it's like
ancient
Shangri-La.
society. Totally,
Yeah.
So they were in the cartoon movie, which some people love, some people hate. I think it's amazing because the cartoon, I was the perfect age to see it, and it just sort of snapped my brain. I'm like, wait, everything I know is a lie. Cobra Commander is actually this mutant snake guy. Anyways, so there's some people that hate that stuff, but I was trying to bridge that, and I do a song about it on the album, where it's like, well, if they were real and I worked for Cobra and I was just like some regular guy from like wherever, Chicago or something, I'm like I don't want to go fight these snake people who are mutating everybody. This is crazy. I don't want to go to Wordburglar. So that was sort of my take on it. And then I, of course, created this character called Rap Viper, who was the rapper who motivated the Cobra troops, because the Vipers all have, there's like Astro Vipers and Toxo Vipers and Ninja Vipers, all these different Viper Corps who have their own specialty, but there was never a Rap Viper.
That's dope.
So that's when I was like, yo, what are they listening to when they're driving around their Hiss tanks? They need some tunes.
That was your hook on that song, right? Rap Viper.
Yeah, Rap Viper. Yeah. So that's the jam. That's the video. Yeah.
What is this would be the last thing we could say for G.I. Joe, but what is hey,
we can do the whole podcast about it.
No, this is tight. I've never spoken with anyone who's such an expert on this.
Oh, I just enjoy it. I just love it,
What is Cobra's ultimate goal? So like ISIS's goal would be to create the caliphate, right? Like the Islamic State, right? Sure. Or like in Infinite Jest, David Foster Wallace's book about in the future, Canada and America join and the Canadians want to separate from the US. What are these guys' ultimate goals? And are there women too, or is it just dudes?
Oh yeah, there's, you know what? There's a lot. I think some of the best female characters that I would read about were from G.I. Joe as a kid, like the Baroness Lady J, Scarlet, Jinx, Cover Girl, Zarana. There's Pythona. There's a lot of great female characters. But yeah, Cobra's goal is just total global domination. Okay. And Cobra Commander's just basically this maniacal sociopath who just wants to rule everything. And
so he's kind of a fascist.
Yeah, you could say that. And he's got this venomous ideology that's just sort of based. He loves chaos, but he loves controlling the chaos. And he just gets his kicks from doing stuff like, drawing his face in the moon or,
So he's a megalomaniacal man who's risen to power, who believes in his ego. Sounds familiar. We don't have to get too political.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I won't go there.
Is he into genocide, or is he going to let everyone be okay, or what's his ultimate plan?
I guess, I like to hope that he wasn't like a total like genocidal maniac. Like he was more just like, he just wants to he wants everyone to kiss his feet and do what he says. And yeah, if he totally rules the world, I don't know, would he ever be happy? Would any of these?
Right.
But there was no there was nothing tied into like religion or anything. It was just more like he just wanted to take over the globe and do whatever he wanted.
Right.
And I guess he just really hated the globe.
And back in the 80s, that seemed impossible, right? It seemed kind of like someone couldn't manipulate information to become a global dictator. And that's what's kind of nostalgic. Like going back, it's like, oh, well, that could never happen.
Right. Yeah. And so, enjoying that stuff is when you watch it now, if you've never seen it before, it's kind of hard to this is ludicrous.
Right.
Watching it. Yeah. Well.
It's, I like doing, Sean, I like writing as a villain, but giving that villain a redemptive quality. And I think some of Shakespeare's best characters are his villains, like Iago in Othello, or like that song I did with Cool Keith, giving him notes on how to rap as Judge Doom on the Roger Rabbit track. Like, that's always interesting to me. And that must have been interesting writing from a villain's perspective, right? Trying to find humanity in that character.
Absolutely. And their reasoning and their logic for it. And that is super fun. And I love doing that because, again, Shakespeare's a great example. You've got all these characters, Iago or people who are flawed and, they believe they're right and and you can't correct them. But redeeming them, it's so fun. That's why what we do is so fun. Like I love it, and I'm thankful to have the opportunity to do it and tour around and share this stuff with people and hopefully just keep getting better at it. Right, that's
connecting with people who are also intrigued by these stories.
Yeah,
because it's the mythology of our generation, really. Mm-hmm. You're a big Marvel fan.
Sure. Yeah.
So you made me think of something. You talked about the Cobra Commander. Is that the king? That's the leader of the Cobra?
Yeah.
So you're saying how if he were to take over the world, would he be happy? And it makes me think about Silver Surfer's origin story, right? Where I might be making a big jump here, but do you know a lot about his origin story?
Well, in terms of like how he was created or his origin,
his
in the
planet.
Comics? Was it not Shalabal? I'm blanking on it, but I mean, he basically was responsible for a whole bunch of people dying, right? And then he had to like surf the skyways to the spaceways and redeem himself. And he was the messenger of Galactus, and he swore allegiance to Galactus to save his planet from dying. I think I'm totally Silver Surfer's one that I'm a little spotty on. Clearly,
it's almost like a messiah for that planet.
He was
right?
totally a messiah. I mean, that's sort of an idea. I know, because that character is sort of contested on who fully created it. Was it Jack Kirby or Stan Lee? And I think both of them brought a lot to that character. But definitely when Stan Lee was writing Surfer, he did write him with this messiah complex for sure, and he had to save the Earth and convince he worked with Galactus, the consumer of planets, to help try and find planets that he could eat to save like the people he cared about.
Wow. And I remember hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that on Silver Surfer's planet, people would kill themselves because life was so perfect, right? And like everything was so boring because it was like a perfect planet. Is that true, or is that like made up?
I'm not as much of a Silver Surfer expert to confirm or deny that, but it sounds plausible for sure. There's been a lot of different stories of Silver Surfer in the last like 50 years. So so I don't know that one. Yeah.
But my connection is the Cobra Commander could take over the Earth. Then he tries to take over his planet, but things are so perfect that it ends up in him annihilating himself. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just like to think of like how these stories connect and how that relates to our own journeys. And going back to what you were saying, like having to always prove yourself. If everything were perfect and we all were like millionaires and like everything we did charted, we might lose our hunger and our edge. And that might not be good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm kind of glad I never made it. In some ways, Right. I mean, made it. What's that? I mean, what's the definition of making it? But I mean, I'm glad I never wanted to sign a label. I knew a lot of people who did sign label deals. I've seen a lot of people sign deals and then make the worst album I've ever heard them do. Won't name names, but definitely artists that I looked up to in the underground in Canada, and then they'd sign on or they'd do something. I was like, whoa. Why does your stuff suck now?
Right. And
because they were being forced to do something that wasn't purely them. I mean, do you think if you were on a label, would they let you do a whole album dedicated to Roger Rabbit? like when you're nuts.
Right. Yeah. I think I've always prided and loved that I have been able to do whatever the heck I want.
Exactly.
And I think that's like a lesson that our fans and other people in the scene can look up to people like you doing a G.I. Joe record or doing a record about whatever you want. And it's inspiring. And I think that's what I love about hip hop is that we're able to tell whatever stories we want, however we want, with our friends and collaborate. And that like, there's no one right way to do things. And like MC Chris said on a song I did with him, he said, hip hop is nonstop mistakes. Sometimes the things we don't think are going to be good or the things we think we flub end up being our best things. Have you ever had anything like that? Like a song you're like, that's just an album cut, and then everyone's like, "Yo, Wordburglar, you got to play blah blah."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cream of Wheat's kind of one of those too,
Okay.
and that was, it wasn't a flub, I guess, but it was one that I just sort of, I was like, well, I'm just gonna do this to me, like, and I would think like, I mean, I made the first song I made like, when I broke off from my crew, the Dregs of Society, and we didn't break off. They were just not really interested in rapping, and I was like, I'm just going to start writing solo tracks, and I did these little demo songs, and I did a song that was just called The Wordburglar, and it was just me like goofing around and like come up with this crazy chorus, I burgle words, and it was just like this like really over the top kind of thing, and then I was just like, this would be for me and like 5 of my friends who think it's funny,
Right.
and then that wound up getting. That was on a demo I sent to Hand Solo Records, and they put it on Basements of Bad Men 2, which was this rap compilation. And then it became like a featured song on that compilation, got a lot of college radio play. And next thing I knew, everybody kind of knew that song. But it was more like, it was fun.
Kind of like a fluke.
It was a bit of a fluke, yeah.
Is Wordburglar a parody of Turd Burglar, or is that not true?
No, I don't even know. Like, yeah. I mean, that first song, I rhymed turd. I rhymed like gurgling turds, burgling words, because that's sort of like obviously where people's minds are going to go.
But you never heard that phrase turd burglar as like an insult?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But no, it was not a play on that. To me, it was just like, honestly, I was just like rhyming, like it came out like from just like, I was like, I'm hurdling verbs, I'm burgling words, call me the word burglar, it that's just kind of like, and that was like, honestly, like, I was doing a lot of super scientifical kind of, like that's like that late 90s, like super scientifical, I'm doing it like the rhyme style, and definitely like that underground, listening to a lot of like.
Stealing all the vocab words you can.
Yeah.
So you can drop them. Right.
Exactly. That's tight. Like just all the words. And that's just kind of, I remember walking down the street like rhyming, because I'd write rhymes in my head. I wouldn't even write them down. Then I'd just like say them over and over.
Wow.
And then I'd like when I'd find a place to write them down, I'd write them down. But I'd perfect my rhymes by just keeping them going in my head. And I would freestyle listening to beats when I'd just be walking everywhere, like on my paper route and stuff, for example.
Right.
That's when I started doing it. I'd always have mixtapes and listening to beats all the time. Anyways, that's how I was just sort of like, it came out of like verb hurdling, word burgling.
That's
and then I just was like, oh, it's Wordburglar, the original, verb hurdler,
And then your character with the mask. That was when your artist came up with that, or was that your concept?
That was like for my first shows. Again, like I was super influenced by Wu-Tang Clan and obviously old school rap. And like, I remember like those early, like getting the Source magazine, and you would see Wu-Tang and they'd all just be wearing like ninja outfits and like all black masks. And you were like, what is going on? And 8 dudes jumping on stage, all dressed like crazy microphone ninjas, And like, so to me, there was like a certain theatrical element that I wanted to bring. So when I booked a live show, I was like, what am I going to do? And so I went to this Halloween store and then like got this crappy burglar costume. I was like, wouldn't it be funny if I just came out for the first song in this burglar costume?
Yeah.
And so I did that, and like the place went nuts. Like if you run through a bar filled with drunk people, like on a Friday night, as this crazy beats playing, wearing this burglar costume, like people lost their minds. So I got up and I did that in the costume, and then, took off the costume after the first song and rapped. And was like, this is more than just like the gimmick. Like that, to me, that was my main concern, and why I stopped doing that maybe a year later, was because I don't want people to just associate the costume with, I want you to be like, yo, okay, yeah, the costume's super fun. It's a good theatrical element, but it adds to it. But it's like the songs are there, like the content is there. And, but yeah, those early shows, I really, it was super fun just dressing up in this costume and running on stage, and people were like, what? And then people remember, oh, who's the guy in the burglar costume? Oh, that was Wordburglar.
Right.
And then, I sold a lot of CDs, man, at that show.
2012, I saw Riff Raff at South by Southwest, and he had like this big icy diamonds that looked like a 7-Eleven icy. And I was like, that's ridiculous. But I remembered it. And I was like, I always rocked the Ace hat. And I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do to keep a consistency? So I started wearing all black, and then wearing that Zelda thing on a chain. I saw some rapper, like I saw some on Tumblr, someone with that. And I was like, okay, well, then I made a song about that game because I love that game. But I was like, Okay, but it's got to be subtle. I used to dress up in costumes like for my different characters and like have a different costume for every
I
song.
remember the Poe one, right?
Right, yeah. That was dressing up as Poe. I did a show dressed up as him. But yeah, you kind of just want to be yourself, right, on stage. Sometimes the gimmick can override the quality. But then some people do have a costume and it's different. I don't know.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm totally open to the idea of coming out in costume again. It may happen just because it is fun. And I'm like confident in the content of the music and my back catalog now of like, all these songs that I've done. Like, I'm just dressed. This is fun to dress up and give people that hype, especially as just a rapper. I'm not coming out with a guitar. I'm not coming, we're not being on stage. If it's like a big event coming out in some crazy costume, it's like, that's going to get people hype.
Right.
So yeah, maybe, I'll never say never, they may have to don the costume again.
Or ski mask.
Or ski mask, yeah.
Oh, shoot. What is the origin of Backburner? And what's your connection to that crew?
Okay, so Jesse Dangerously and I played on a baseball team together. And I think we were in Scouts together as well, Cub Scouts. And we kind of lived on different ends of Halifax in different areas. And I was kind of doing my own thing, and people were always like, oh, you should link up with Jesse. I'm like, oh, yeah, Jesse, I know that guy. And then it really wasn't until I was working at Strange Adventures, this comic shop in Halifax in high school. And again, Jesse came through, and I think that's when our friendship sort of reconnected. And he would like bring in his Walkman. I remember he'd like give me his headphones, and I'd listen to demos he was making. It was like, oh, dope. And like the Halifax hip hop scene, especially around that, let's say late 90s, early 2000s, there was like a lot of awesome stuff happening. It was like the early days of Anticon was just about to happen. Buck 65 and 6'2", and the Sebutones obviously like linked up with the Anticon guys. I remember them bringing out like Sage Francis before Sage Francis had fully...
And Soul too.
And Soul, yeah.
There, right?
There was like a whole bunch. There was a great... Like underground hip hop was alive and well in Halifax. And Joe Run, who's really like the godfather of Halifax hip hop in my mind, he was this beat producer and he was doing all this stuff. Anyways, Jesse and I were kind of like doing and working hard and like had been rapping like a long time at that point. We were still high school kids or whatever. And like we were fans of the Halifax scene, whereas a lot of other people who I think were making rap at that time were trying to emulate like Snoop Dogg or Puff Daddy or something or Biggie. And it's like, no, we're kind of like looking up to these like local heroes. So I was like amazed at Joe Run and Buck 65 and these people doing just really, really dope stuff back then. So I think that inspired the creativity. Anyways, I was kind of doing my own thing, rolling with like my crew, the Dregs, and just having fun and messing around and freestyling at parties. And Jesse wound up linking up with a few of these cats and they started building Backburner. And then it came time for me to record my solo demo. And I was like, you know what? I've never actually tried to record professionally. I've been recording on this crappy mic and a Radio Shack mixer and all this crap I just like collected over the years in my room. And my friends and I had been just making our previous tapes on. So Jesse's like, I know this guy with the studio. You should come by. You can record with him. So I had linked up with Beat Mason at that point, who's just an incredible beat producer, and I had some beats that I had made, and so with these, I had a couple songs. I'm like, I could rap over this, like, this dope Beat Mason beat or like this track I made, and Jesse introduced me to this guy, Fresh Kills, and Fresh Kills is like, oh, I got some beats you can rap on. So I'm like, oh, crazy. So next thing you know, I'm like, yo, Kills beats and Beat Mason's beats are way better than my beats. So throw away my beats. And I started recording, and I recorded this demo over the Beat Mason Kills beats in Kills studio. And that was, Backburner had already been kind of started. So there was like a bunch of other people already involved there, Jesse and Kills and Jay Busy and Thesis and Fess and Process, Dexter Doolittle. So there was this whole crew of those people. Anyways, this was all in Halifax. I moved to Toronto shortly after, and those, and Kills was actually originally from Toronto. So then I moved to Toronto and was sort of getting involved in the Toronto scene and going to these freestyle nights, and I met up with More or Less, and we became buddies there because he was DJing at this show called In Divine Style. And so I met Les and we connected, and we just started like freestyling together and hanging out and writing raps. Kills moved back to Toronto. I was like, let's go hang out with Kills. Then Jesse came through, and then the whole Backburner thing just started coming. And I think we were all kind of like, the outcasts maybe of like all these other scenes. So we wound up linking with these great, the Tool Shed guys who were from London, and I'm going to be forgetting people when I start naming everybody, but yeah, like Thesis and Jesse and I, and we were all sort of like, we kind of found each other because we were all doing sort of the different things within our respective scenes. I think we kind of all stood out in a way, but we were kind of like nerdcore. Like we all kind of just found each other.
Or like Anticon.
Like Anticon, yeah. And then I got invited to tour with, Tool Shed and Thesis and Jesse. And this was, 2005, I guess. And so Backburner, I guess, originally started, I don't know when maybe 2001, 2002. And then I guess I officially became part of the crew around 2004, 2005. And then we've all since become like, now there's like Swamp Thing and More or Less. And, Ghetto Socks and I used to freestyle together at this radio show in Halifax. So I knew Socks from there. And then Socks, obviously, came in and, the Swamp Thing, More or Less. I'm forgetting so many people, but, all the producers and DJs and Beat Mason and, now we're just basically this Canadian collective, and we're all still just hustling and putting out stuff. And there's been various groups throughout, but like really like everyone that I was kind of coming up with, like Jesse and Les and Swamp Thing and Ghetto Socks, Beat Mason, like everybody's still doing stuff now. Mm-hmm. And it's this strong, we're just like this Canadian underground rap crew, and we now kind of spawn across Canada and into Japan. Oh, Ginsu, I forgot Ginsu. See, that's so hard because the crew is crazy. But at any given time, I'd say there's probably about 10 of us that are really grinding hard, like, Les and Jesse and the Swamp Thing crew, and Tim and Chocules and Civilian. Like, we've all got a lot of albums and been prolific, and obviously when we come down, get to hang out with all you guys at South by and do stuff like that. So, but Backburner, we're just kind of the underground rap outcasts from Canada.
So is there like a centralized website or Twitter? It's just kind of like you give
there's a Twitter Backburner crew, which is just sort of like aggregates, I think, everybody's different things. To find most of the releases have come out through Han Solo Records. So, which is this dope Canadian underground rap label that's been around for over 2 decades. And they put out a lot of classic rap from like Buck 65 and Mocha Only and a bunch of different artists. And myself and Jesse and Les and everybody. So a lot of the Backburner stuff, I mean, if you type in Backburner crew, you can probably kind of find us. I know on Bandcamp, all the stuff's up there. So there's 2 official group albums, Backburner Heatwave, Backburner Eclipse, and they're just basically posse cut albums. So inspired by like Souls of Mischief, Wu-Tang Clan, stuff like that. When you want to hear, 5 or 6 different rappers rapping on 14 tracks,
right?
And there's interesting combinations, and we all get to play off each other. And those are the most fun to make. And we've got a 3rd album that's hopefully going to be out by the end of 2019 or early 2020. So there'll be a 3rd Backburner crew album.
Is it done?
It's, I'd say it's probably about 70% there.
Yeah.
So we've recorded a lot. There's still a lot of, I think, people that are still just kind of getting together on some tracks. But we do try and do like these summits because we all live in different cities. So usually in January, we try and get as many people together as possible. And we meet at Timbuktu's studio. And it's sort of like, I'd say Tim's is kind of like the central place where a lot of the meetings and stuff happens. But like, Uncle Fess has got his studio headquarters in Halifax, and so he does stuff with like Jay Busy and Ghetto Socks and stuff, and Ambition out there. And then like Kills has got his studio, but it's great to be still making music with all the people that I was really sort of coming up with, as I was just sort of coming of age,
right?
As a rap. And so we have tracks from like 15 years ago together where we're all like, oh man, like this is like, we're kind of embarrassed by it, but we're all there on the track. So it's like, oh, yo, Choke, remember when you rapped this? Or like, Jesse, and we'll call out, I always call out Jesse. I'm like, yo, Jesse, remember when you said that, man? He's like, oh, I'm not proud of that.
It's like yearbooks of our lives.
Yeah. So that was a very rambly, disjointed summation of Backburner.
But it's interesting because I found when I do a collaboration, it's twice as fun and it's half as easy most of the time, or less, because you give each other ideas and you don't have to write as many lyrics. You write half as many lyrics. Or if there's 6 people, you write 17% as many lyrics. And that's like very fun because you really, and you also want to, like, you're competitive. So that's why that first Wu-Tang record is so great, because everyone just kind of, you know what I mean? You want to, make each other better. And That's cool. Community.
Absolutely. It's community, and we all show up on each other's tracks. There's rapper guest appearances by all the crew on all my albums and different, beats and everything. And we all kind of come together. And it's a collection of, just dope MCs, producers, DJs, and just people who are we're all really rooted in a pure love of hip hop and like a certain era of hip hop for sure. Like, that 90s era, early 2000s, like lyrics and beats. And even now, like you could say like 2019, I could probably name like 20 dope albums that I've heard that like fall into that category of like just really awesome lyrical rap. Like there's so much great stuff coming on.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's like the pentatonic scale on blues that will always be like feel kind of timeless. Yeah. Like great battle raps over great beats is like, that will always sound classic. In 20 years, that will be like, that's that era, but it has a timelessness to it.
Yeah. Shout out to you, all these amazing references you're just pulling from the air, man. It's like MC Lars. This is an absolute pleasure to be here. Like I was like looking forward to this. I was like, all week I was emailing, we're still on for this podcast. Let's do it. I've had a great week. I did the show with Schaefer and Dual Core and Michael Kill and Lex on Saturday, and then we got this show coming up. I don't know when this is dropping, but get to hang with you in front a lot. Yeah, Philly.
How did so that came together? They just hit you up?
Yeah, I just got a message online about it, and I was like, "Yo, is this really who I think it is?" And like, yeah, it is. I was like, "Okay, dope." Like, I could be in Philly. I've never played Philly, so
that's nice.
Yeah, it'll be my first time. I've been driven through Philadelphia before, but never done a show there. So hopefully, I'm sure it's gonna be amazing.
It's gonna be tight.
Yeah,
Philly always. Yeah, New York. In my experience, when I play here, it can be good, but it also can be like, since there's so much going on, you're eclipsed by like Hamilton and the Rolling Stones or whatever's in town. And
it's like Toronto, same thing.
Yeah, it's like Philly. I feel like they show up for music more. I don't know. Maybe that's just because do you know what I'm saying? Like Toronto feel like that sometimes you're competing with some great stuff.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing as New York. Any given night you could go see 100 different concerts or plays or sporting events. There's always something crazy going on. Toronto's such an amazing city. And we've been doing the $5 rap show now. We just had our 9th anniversary. So More or Less and I and Doogie Howitzer have been running this show. Wow. And it's like just indie hip hop. It's a really chill night, $5 rap show, $5 gets you in. It's more rap than you pay for. And it's just basically to like keep the indie hip hop vibe alive. So a lot of people, touring artists come through and, no one really makes like a ton of money on it, but it's more like getting a chance to play, expose, invite your friends out, sell some merch, meet people, and just hone your craft. And I've seen in the 9 years we've been doing it, I've seen a lot of artists just meet and connect and then build together. And like there are like albums and songs that are direct results of things that happen at $5 rap shows. So I kind of take like a tiny little bit of, pride in like saying, I remember when I introduced these two people and now they got a record out together. And it's like, so that's like, to me, it's like, it's been a great way to see the scene grow. And those are the nights that I love to go to when you're on tour and you show up at a place, you're like, this is like our monthly hip hop show. And this is kind of where community is here and people are supporting it. And like, if there were these shows in every city across the world, we'd all have better, the network would be better. Like, at least like Canada is very hard to tour because there's so much, it's so sprawling and you have to, in many cases, you have to drive like 14 hours between shows to like over and over. So I made it my goal to tour the country since last August. And I've been getting across and playing places I've never played before and finding these cool little pockets like, I've never heard of any of you and you're all super dope and you've never heard of me or my crew. So now we're like building these bridges between like people in Vancouver or Saskatchewan or wherever. And I'm just throwing out Canadian places.
How is Calgary?
Well, Calgary's a cool city. They somehow earned the reputation of being Texas North,
right?
Because there's a lot of oil there, I guess, and people like
they have a big rodeo.
Rodeo stampede there. They love many things that people in Texas love. So I've been to Texas and Calgary. I've been to both places many times. So there's a bit of connection there, I guess, but it's different. Yeah. Calgary's great. I had great shows there. I was at the Comic Expo as well, which was dope. Yeah, I did a really fun show in Calgary. Played in Edmonton. Played with Kirby Crackle actually recently. Like this year's been crazy. Like shout out Kirby Crackle. Like
he's awesome.
You know how it is. Yeah. Like, you're on the road. I'm like, oh man, what show was that? Who was I with?
Right. Do you ever play Nunavut?
No. So that one, I've been trying to crack that code. Have you played there?
No. I've only played, let's say I played Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal.
Okay.
That's
all
it.
great cities.
Yeah. But I've never been that far north.
No, I looked into trying to get a show there, and I was
Yeah.
like actively pursuing it for a while, and I'd still like to get out there if anyone listening here has a connection there. But I found like it seemed the music venues, one was like in a hotel and the other was at a pizza place. Like I don't think there was that many places you could just show up and do a show, you know. So I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
I just could not find anyone there who was able to give me any kind of answers. I'm like, look, if I'm going to travel all the way over there, you know, I'd like to be able to do something, you know? Yeah.
Is that the last province you haven't played?
Yeah, there's some little islands and stuff, but yeah, I guess that would be for this time. Yeah, like the Northwest Territories I've never been to. Yukon I haven't been to. So yeah, so I'd like to get up around there. Like the
awesome,
North is
man.
crazy, yeah. To truly be the nerd of the North.
I wanted to clear something up because a lot of American rappers are always salty about this, and I don't think it's justified. But please, let's set it straight. People are always like, "Oh, well, Canadian artists get so much support from the government. They're forced to play their music on the radio. They pay for all the videos." Is that true, or is that like a rumor?
Well, depending how you look at it, there's a thing called CanCon, and CanCon is a certain, and that's just because we're so inundated with all this stuff from the UK or from the US and all these different channels. And since there's a smaller population in Canada, it's totally easy to have to just watch American television or just watch British TV and not ever see any Canadian stuff. So I have heard the history over the years, but CanCon was developed as Canadian content.
Okay.
And it was just developed so that there's a certain percentage of Canadian music or television or films playing at any given time. So, you know, unfortunately, sometimes that results in a whole bunch of Celine Dion and Drake
or Nickelback.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, we could always use more Wordburglar and, you know, Backburner crew.
Right.
You know, we could use more MC Lars on the radio there, right? So, I mean, I always, if I'm listening to radio, it's usually college radio. I love college radio to this day. College radio has given me a lot of love over the years. And that's always where I've gotten the most play. Now, we have CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is national. Right. And they do play a ton of Canadian content stuff. And there are grants for sure. And I've received grants in the past for, you know, just to help support. And these grants come from the TV and radio industry and the government.
Wow.
To help support the creation of new art within Canada by Canadians. So, and that applies to, not just music, but film and TV and just art and writing, literature, everything. So the government does definitely fund. I've heard also, you know, it's funny, you know, people here will be like, oh, Canada gets to have all these grants. Like, and then I hear these, like some European countries and stuff where they're like, no, you're fully subsidized or you can do all this. And, but yeah, there are a lot of grant opportunities. I'm super thankful for them. Like Factor has been amazing. And a lot of the touring that I've done, I would not have been able to have done without Factor, which is this grant. Like you write grants and apply to Factor, and they assist Canadian talent on radio. And it's the foundation assisting Canadian talent on radio. And they basically, you know, you work hard and prove that, hey, look, this is his plan I want to do. And there's no possible way that, say, I could tour Canada on my own, you know, but I've got this new album, I got this new project I want to do. And I think I can prove that enough people might be interested. And then you go. And then as a Canadian artist, you're sort of, you know, when I travel down here, I'm saying, you know, Factor helped me make this happen. And they're like, you know, so there's definitely a bit of a, you know, a Canadian, there definitely is a Canadian support system, but of course it's always getting cut back by the government and
it sounds like you have to hustle.
Stupid politicians. You have to hustle. You have to prove. I mean, this Rhyme Your Business is my 6th full-length album. Wow. Plus I've got tons of other mixtapes and like group albums and like
you just did a Star Wars project.
Yeah,
right?
I just did a May the 4th. Yeah, the Mos Eisley rap show, which is on Bandcamp. Yeah, so like I've got so many projects out there, so I was able to prove that like, listen, I'm, you know, if you give me a little bit of give me a little grant, I am going to make the most of it because I'm doing this no matter what. So I think that's where it happens.
Your discography, probably, they're like, we could give it to this new person who isn't tested, or we could give it to Wordburglar, who's burgling mad words.
Yeah.
Right. And so they know it's a good investment.
Well, yeah, and I hope so. And I hope that I've been using it, as smartly and as conservatively as I possibly can, and stretching every single cent, because it's not, it's not a ton of money, but it's like every little bit helps, right? So, when you're on tour, you need gas money, you have paying for hotels. Like sometimes you get stiffed by a promoter.
Right.
Sometimes like all this stuff can happen. And sometimes you your car breaks down and you're, who knows what's going to happen.
It's such a gamble taking this from our bedroom to the bars of the world and clubs. And that's interesting, man. And I think also there are grants in the US that, people can apply for. And I do like, though, how it's this Canadian idea that they don't want the hegemonic influence of all this other bigger cultural empires squishing their artists. I think that's cool. And there's been so many Canadian exports that are very, amazing comedy and music and everything.
We've got great culture there. I mean, as do you guys. And Canadian art is fantastic. And I love the US, but I've never really considered moving here. I've always thought, I have so many friends here and I have family here, but I've always I'm like, I'm happy to stay in Canada. So I think having the grant system there also helps keep artists in Canada, and a lot of times what you see happen, some people go to the States and go to Hollywood or something and make it big, and then they come back to Canada and they're like, it's a different, then they get more recognition and stuff, right? So,
right.
There's tons of people, Seth Rogen or something, you think like, Tom Green, Celine Dion, whatever. She's just, her voice is just like, it's butter from the gods.
Well, it's that this celebration. We're proud to have you home, right? And
yeah.
I read Tom Green's book, it's called Hollywood Gives You Cancer. And
I haven't read it.
It's a lot about why he decides to. It's about his Canadian pride, and it's a good read. I liked it a lot, but I love Canada, and I would move there if I could.
For sure. Yeah, we got. You know what? It's a great country. I love Canada, and I'm happy to have been born there. I always think how lucky we are. I mean, being born. Even just being born in North America, it's just such a compared to the rest of the world or where else. It's just some luck of fate in the universe to be born, here.
Yeah.
And, that's why I was, back to that Drake song you mentioned, started from the bottom. I'm like, dude, you started at the top. We're in the North. It's like,
quite literally.
It's like Canada's pretty good, Yeah, when you look at the rest of the world.
The Great White North. Yeah. That classic Rush song. Okay, so
you got all the references, dude. This is amazing.
I wanted to ask you about one of your lines, which I like a lot, and I think this is a good way to wrap up. You have a great line. You say, "There's always free cheese in the mousetrap." Right? I love that lyric because it made me think that's like anything with addiction, with a bad relationship, with distraction. There's always something enticing that can end up destroying us. Mm-hmm. And so in the music industry, how have you not let this free cheese turn you off to hip hop? Because you're one of the people who I know who always seem so positive and excited about rap and the culture. So how do you not let the free cheese crush you?
I guess by just keeping a steady diet in my ears of great music and great independent music and seeing what other people are doing. And not being tempted by all that, the BS that the labels will promise you stuff. And I've had meetings with labels and, I remember definitely in the mid 2000s, they were just like, you should be doing more like Eminem kind of stuff. I was like, well, I was doing my own thing, before. Obviously Eminem is incredible, not going to take away from that, but it's like, that's not me also. That's not going to be what I'm doing. And they're like, and I've never really gotten into that battle scene as much as I always loved battle and punchline rap and stuff like that. Right. And I did battle when I was in high school, and it was, I guess to me, it's just I've never, the free cheese of a music label say, hey, we're going to give you all this money, blah, 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 blah. But then you go on tour, and if you don't make that money back, you're indebted to the label. I've talked to artists who've done incredible albums that have never been released because the label's like, no, you know what? We're shelving this. We're not going to put this out. We've all heard that story, right?
Right.
I mean, Master Ace just released a lost tapes type album. I think it was called Off the Shelf or something shelf. it was this album that just never came out. And I don't know the full story behind that, but I imagine if his, whatever happened to his label, they just shelved all these great songs and then you can't release it because that's stuck to the label. I can't imagine making a song and being told, first of all, how I should make it or, how I should release or when I can release it or when I can't. And yeah, having the help would be great. I'm currently trying to find a manager. I'm trying to find a good booking agent. So if anyone listening knows people, like that's kind of what I need at this point in my life. Someone to help me book shows and expand and get out and figure out what I'm doing wrong in terms of like getting music out to people, but like signing a label deal. It just hasn't enticed me because I see the opposite end. Also, listening to underground rap in the 90s, half these people were just like from the Jizza to like Company Flow and all these groups. They were always talking about like how terrible labels were. So I'm like, why do I want to be on a label? Chuck D saying all this stuff, you can't trust all this. Like, I'm like, yeah, what?
Right.
Like, I don't want to do that. And then, and I certainly wouldn't want to have to make whack stuff to, sell a record. So,
and we have the tools that those people did it, the internet and the crowdfunding. And so that line is specifically, that's like a music industry warning, that lyric.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's like, there's, you're going to get enticed. It's like, oh yeah, I can do this, whatever. And like, I know we can think of a million examples. And then I see people doing it like in Canada. I'm like, you're just trying to emulate some American artist.
Right.
You go down to the States and you're going to be up against 1,000 people who are doing the exact same thing you're doing.
Right.
So why aren't you just trying to do something a little more true to who you are?
And
I mean, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't know what I'm doing. I just love. I love being able to rap. I've always loved rapping. I love rap music, and I'm still doing it, and it's just I don't ever plan to stop. So
do you feel like you'll keep doing it in your late 30s and 40s and 50s?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
I'm trying to be like a 100-year-old rapper. That's the game plan. Right
That's
now.
it.
150-year-old rapper. Let's really raise that bar.
You were talking about you doing an upcoming project, which is like rare stuff and some remixes. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that.
Oh yeah, working on a new project. It's called Spaceverse, and it just sort of dawned on me that I had all these different science fiction tracks that had kind of been floating around of songs I'd done with other, groups, and then just sort of my own stuff that I hadn't found places to release yet. Like with Rhyme Your Business, I'd been working on a bunch of songs that didn't make the album, and then they were really good, but they were just like, well, I've already got like 15 tracks on here. I don't want to make this too big. And so this new project was just like, whoa, all these songs kind of fit together. So I've been trying to work on this way to get them all out. So I'm hoping by the end of the summer, I can release this new project, which is, just some remixes and some new stuff and some unreleased stuff, but it's all on a science fiction tip. So I did just put out that Star Wars inspired EP with the Hoojib song and Mos Eisley rap show.
Would those be on there or not?
I think, I'm going to try and include those.
Cool.
Yeah. So, cause they're space themed. Yeah. So, right. And also a lot of people have asked, can they get a physical copy of that?
Sure. So
I'm looking into actually putting it out on full vinyl, like do full size vinyl for it. And I've got that new 7-inch that.
Thank you for this.
Here. Yeah.
Tight. So it's the Damage Control with Esoteric, and then the Space Defense Team Bix remix on the other side.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
With Mega Ran and Cool Keith. So shout out everybody. Yeah, the art's by Eric Kim on the space side and Dave Howlett on the comic book side, and that's from Black Buffalo Records. And they're a Canadian, pretty much vinyl only label that have just been putting out amazing releases from a lot of great Canadian artists. So definitely check out Black Buffalo Records.
Are these can people get these from your merch store? I know they're very limited.
You can get them off the Black Buffalo Records website. Cool. So I have a few of these that I have at shows to sell, but I'm not directly selling them online.
So direct people there.
Yeah. Cool. So for me, you can go to wordburglar.com and there's links to albums. I'm at propsdepartment.bandcamp.com has all my digital releases. And I'm on all those streaming services, however you like to listen to music. Just type in Wordburglar. I'm the only one in the phone book.
Is it just Wordburglar on Twitter?
Yeah, on Twitter, it's Wordburglar. On Instagram, I'm the Wordburglar because somebody got to Wordburglar before I did.
Oh, man. I'm MC _Lars. Someone got MC Lars and they don't post. And they have like 12 followers. They were just like a week before me.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. I don't
That's
think I had the
crazy.
phone. I was like, I don't think I had a phone that could take good pictures at the time. So I was like, I don't need Instagram. And I'm like, no. I'm late, man. I'm the Luddite. I don't know.
Rhyme Your Business is your newest full length that came out last year.
Yeah, it came out basically at the end of last summer. And
Okay.
that's what I've been touring all year. Rhyme Your Business. Please go give it a listen. There's a whole variety of tracks on there, from comics to video games to rental stores to food to just crazy rhymes and wordplay and fun stuff we like. Friends of ours are on it. There's a new track with Mega Ran on it, and all the Backburner crew, Swamp Thing. And there is actually a G.I. Joe song on it. If people were like, I'm not in G.I. Joe, I'm not checking Wordburglar, like, don't worry. I got mad songs that have nothing to do with G.I. Joe. So
That has the Rental Patience song we talked about.
Rental Patience on
Okay,
there.
cool.
So yeah, we got a video for that. Working on a video now for Mike Heckla, which will be like the second single. So I'm going to I find like, and you probably, I don't know if you feel the same way. Like, I feel like an album doesn't even, like the way we release them, I feel like an album almost takes a year to breathe. And it doesn't really catch on until like the second year. Like that's at least been my experience. Like with Burglaritis, it dropped in 2006, but people didn't really start hearing it or getting in touch with me. I didn't feel any of the benefits of that record till like late 2007, 2008 is when it started hitting. And that's when I was able to do videos. Third Burglar, same way. Replicable Skills, like people are kind of just have been coming on to in the last year, and that album's from 2015. So with Rhyme Your Business, I'm like, well, I think it's my best work yet, and I feel like it's got a lot of time to grow. Like I don't want to abandon it, just because I put it out. Like that's what another problem with labels.
They'll abandon something.
They abandon something, right?
Right.
You get, they'll push you for a month, and then that's it. And it's like, what? Like this album needs to find people. Like there's still millions of people that haven't heard it.
And the cool thing, you could do a video for a song from 2 albums ago.
Yeah.
Because fans suddenly discover it.
I just did.
Yeah, exactly.
Bill Mosienko. Yeah.
That's tight.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing, I think that's the product of like the Spotify algorithms. They'll put a song that people are listening to in a recommended playlist, like If I Follow You, and then that kind of takes on a life of its own. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
cool.
It's great. And I find new people that way. I mean, it's just... It's amazing. And yeah, there's some guy who mentioned, he was like, yeah, I heard you through MC Lars. I'm like, thank you. That's an honor. And hopefully vice versa. I hope someone can hear you from me, when I say, I'm like, yo, I was on the MC Lars podcast, and people be like, who's MC Lars? I'm like, what? How do you not know MC? You know me.
Right.
You haven't heard MC Lars. So yeah.
We're always in each other's, I feel like, top recommended Spotify artists. People who like me, like you, I find that like you're always up in the top ones, and that's
sweet.
Tight. What we did, like the Middle Class of Middle Earth.
Oh yeah, that's a recent one. Yeah, we should talk about that.
With Jason Anarchy.
Yeah, that just kind of came up, and he mentioned to me, and he was like, MC Lars is gonna be on. I'm like, that's dope. And then we rapped about being from Middle Earth, Tolkien. Yeah, I play Sweaty Baggins, the Hobbit who just wants to smoke some pipe weed and chill, dig for truffles. Yeah, so Jason Anarchy does Drinking Quest, which is a really popular tabletop game.
Yeah,
there's a whole bunch of great, really fun games. And I think this was he dabbles in music and wanted to release a vinyl. Like I don't know that it ties into a particular game.
Okay.
But the 7-inch vinyl is dope, and that's available on his website for Jason Anarchy. But we have to do a track that's like we'll talk about this off air. But yeah, I was thinking that on the way. I was like, we got to do an actual like at least one that's like,
we're both focused hard.
We're both focused hard, and we're like, this is the one that works. Because I think we're always kind of appearing on a bunch of different tracks together that we're not really like the puppet master of. And it's like this and that, and like that Reading Rainbow track from
Ben.
a million years ago, which I remember like, I don't think I'd even heard some of the other stuff that was going on, and that was like a long time ago. But I think there's a remix that you may put out or something. Or
oh, there was a remix of that on my second 22 Concerts, which was like a bonus disc.
Yeah. Dope. So that's
crazy.
Gotten out to people, right? But it's also like, oh man, like, that was a long time ago. So we got to make some new stuff.
So it's only those two, I guess, that we know of.
Is that it? I'm sure there might be some
people be tweeting at us. Hey,
yeah, there's like some nerdy posse cuts out there that we're both on.
I learned a lot about G.I. Joe today. I learned a lot about your history and your method, and I appreciate your time, man.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. And this is a great thing you're doing. This podcast is dope as hell. So
thanks,
keep doing it. Keep sharing all these awesome stories.
Thank you, bro. And I want to make sure that everyone listening checks out your new stuff and looks for the new Space concept album and follows the Wordburglar as he keeps killing it.
Au revoir, mes amis.
Adios.
Freeze, don't move, stay where you are. Put down that remote, let me be your levar. Let's celebrate who you are. Read a little babar. The elephant in the room is today's kids are starved. They need imagination, it's not very hard. You can meet the man in the moon with just the library card. So read.
Stroll down the road where the red fern grows. Frog and toad still play and the wind still blows. In the willows lives a world that's free from batteries. Take a look, it's in a book, imagination is the key. And we can speak clearly, like Beverly Cleary. And Ralph S. Mouse loves human friends so dearly. Henry Huggins and Risby have a paper route. Growing up is so confusing, but Ramona works it out. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret, menstruating in the bathroom, adolescent target. Then again, maybe I will lock my bathroom door. Blue marker on the face, it's the freckle juice cure. Marty Preston has a friend, and his name is Shiloh. In West Virginia, where the lilacs lie low. And when the stinky cheese man is on the run, I never knew PBS could be so much fun.
Read a book. Reading Rainbow. Wordburglar. Read some books that help you know stuff. Check, I can't lie. Most of my favorite books have pictures in them. Action, adventure, ridiculous. We're all pictures in them. Fix the system, invisibles, matrix, outwards. Literature, insured, I can spout words. The music, before I knew it, C.S. Lewis. Let me move with anything with no BS to it. Rue it, kids from Narnia to Slaughterhouse 5. Choose your own adventure, never thought about why. Life of Pi, friend forever in piles and dirt. Graduated Maurice to Alan Moore. Excalibur, Caliber, Cavalier and Clay. J.D. Salinger, rabbit ears and bear. So stay between the pages. Kids, I'm telling you, books is major. Yo, pocketbook, paperback. On my favorite snack, it's X. Flip it to see what comes next. Read a book. Reading Rainbow. Check it out, I just wrecked my Zephyr and the sails won't fly, so I'm stuck forever in a land far away, and I'll have to stay. I should've known it was gonna be a very bad day. I should've moved to Australia, chill with kangaroos, worn a purple coat with my bright white shoes. Imagination's endless, but pasta's not. That is unless you happen to possess a pasta pot that's magic. So I throw a batch and it starts to grow, but I should've listened when Stregonona said no. Sometimes I guess I have to learn my lessons on my own. Turns out there's no Gila monsters at my new home. Turns out there's nice monsters underneath my bed, and I don't fear being where the wild things tread. I'm starting to understand how it's just a purple crayon. I can draw an adventure with only my hand. I can dig up dinosaurs and assemble the bones, find a buttonless bear and give him a home, and travel so far without leaving my chair. Picking blueberries with sail. Look out, a bear. I'll keep on reading. I'm never gonna stop like a pre-Jimmy Neutron Bob full and stretching soda pop till it's endless. Create a little mischief like Calvin and Dennis. My day got worse, now I'm at the dentist, but Mrs. Piggle wiggling in her house upside down and solving a case with Encyclopedia Brown. And a chance of rain from a meatball cloud to turn my frown upside down and my day around. Now I'm prepared for anything, whatever I do. If it rains carrots or there's a phantom toll booth that appears just to test me, or a pirate with the hook got me hooked. It's fun, come take a look in a book. Read. Let's have an adventure. Reading Rainbow. Go buy a book. Check your library. One. Orlando Library. I like them. Words, I mean. That's why I burgle them. Read a book.
Books. Thank you, Wordburglar. That was awesome. Next week, we have the legendary Weird Paul, whose new album is coming out the week after next. And Weird Paul is very inspiring, very amazing guy. I talked to him when I was in Pittsburgh, and it's a great conversation. So be sure to check that out. Thank you all for listening. Please like and share, leave a review, and I hope you're all having a great summer. Have a great week. I'll see you next Monday. Thanks, y'all. Peace.